It was just a cafe, just another ordinary day, until her hand touched mine, and in that single moment, she held on as if she'd been waiting her whole life not to let go. The cafe had always been my quiet refuge. It wasn't anything grand, just a corner place with old wooden floors and the smell of roasted beans lingering in the air. The kind of place where the clinking of cups and the soft hum of conversation melted into the background, leaving space for thought. That morning, rain pattered against the windows, threading little rivers down the glass. I'd slipped inside to escape the chill, expecting nothing more than a warm drink and a stretch of solitude. But then I saw her. She sat by the window, where the light softened her face into something almost painterly. Her hair fell loosely against her shoulders, the faintest silver glinting among darker strands, not a mark of age, but of grace, like the quiet lines of a well-loved book. A half-open novel lay in front of her, but she wasn't reading. Every so often she turned a page absently, her eyes drifting out toward the rain as if listening for something only she could hear. I told myself not to stare, but there was something about her presence that was impossible to ignore. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, though she was, in a way that didn't announce itself loudly but drew you closer the longer you looked. It was the composure in her posture, the calm way her fingers wrapped around the porcelain cup, the curve of her smile when the barista brought her refill. Confident, yet quietly untouchable. Still, there was a softness beneath it all, something in her expression that spoke of distance. Loneliness, maybe, or longing, the kind that isn't desperate but lived with, carried gracefully like a scarf across the shoulders. I wondered if anyone else noticed it, or if it was only me who saw it in that moment. I tried to distract myself, focusing on the warmth of my own coffee, on the notebook I'd brought with me, but my eyes betrayed me. They kept flicking back to her. To the way she tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. To the way she rested her chin on her hand and sighed, barely audibly, as though the weight of her thoughts had settled heavily for a moment. And then it happened, she looked at me. Just for a second. But it was long enough for my breath to catch. Her gaze wasn't sharp or questioning, it was steady, calm, with the faintest trace of amusement, like she knew she'd been caught being noticed. My chest tightened in a way I couldn't quite explain. I felt both exposed and drawn in, as though she'd pulled me into her quiet world without a single word. I looked away quickly, embarrassed, pretending to scribble something in my notebook. But the truth was, the letters blurred on the page. All I could think about was her, the woman by the window, the one whose presence had just shifted the entire rhythm of an ordinary rainy morning. I didn't know it then, but this glance, this silent exchange, would be the beginning of something I hadn't even known I was waiting for. The next time I saw her, the cafe was alive in a way it rarely was. The rain had driven in more people than usual, every chair, every corner seemed occupied. I stepped through the door and felt the press of voices, the shuffle of coats and umbrellas dripping onto the floor. I almost turned back, I hated forcing myself into crowded places, but then my eyes fell on her again. She was there, by the window, the same seat as before. Her book was open this time, though she wasn't reading it. She had a way of resting her fingers on the page as though she needed the weight of something steady to keep her anchored. I hesitated near the counter, scanning the room for a place to sit. There was nothing. Just as I considered standing by the door with my coffee, I noticed her glance up. Her eyes found mine with surprising ease, as though she'd already been aware of me before I noticed her. And then, with the smallest gesture, barely more than a lift of her chin and the hint of a smile, she motioned toward the empty chair across from her. For a moment, I froze. Did she really mean me? It felt too direct, too personal. But when I hesitated, she spoke, her voice warm, low, carrying just enough weight to cut through the cafe noise. You can sit here, if you'd like. The way she said it, it wasn't just an offer. It was an invitation. I nodded quickly, grateful and a little nervous, and carried my cup toward her table. Sliding into the chair, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, subtle, not floral, but something deeper, like cedar with a touch of spice. It fit her perfectly, grounded, quietly magnetic. "Thank you," I murmured. Her lips curved in a small smile. "It's too crowded to be territorial about tables." The words were casual, but her gaze lingered a beat too long. And just like that, the air between us shifted. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. She returned her attention to her book, though her eyes didn't seem to move across the lines, and I stirred my coffee longer than necessary, feeling the unspoken awareness settle between us. Strangely, the silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was charged, humming with the sense that something had begun, though neither of us had said it aloud. I studied her hands, graceful, the kind of hands that spoke of someone used to holding things with care. Every so often, she traced the rim of her cup with her fingertip absent-mindedly, and I felt myself wondering what it might feel like if that touch lingered against my own skin. At one point, her eyes flicked up again. Our gazes caught, and this time, neither of us looked away immediately. I felt the thrum of my own pulse in my throat, the world narrowing to just that table, just her. It wasn't conversation, not yet. But it was something else, a wordless recognition, the beginning of a thread being tied between us. And even as I tried to act casual, sipping my coffee, pretending to read my notebook, a part of me knew, this table wasn't shared by accident. The rain had eased by then, leaving the windows streaked with silver trails, and the cafe had quieted. A few voices still murmured at the far tables, but the chaos from earlier had thinned into something softer, calmer. It felt as if the room itself had taken a breath and settled. We'd been sitting together in easy silence, the kind that only works when neither person is trying too hard. She'd returned her gaze to her book, though I suspected she wasn't really reading it. I tried to write a few notes in my notebook, though my pen hovered more than it moved. There was an unspoken awareness between us, as though both of us were waiting for something to happen but neither knew what. It came in the smallest, simplest way. The sugar jar sat in the middle of the table, closer to her side. I reached for it without thinking, at the same time she moved her hand forward. My fingers brushed against hers. It should have been nothing, a fleeting accident, the kind of moment people laugh off politely. But she didn't pull her hand away. Instead, her fingers rested lightly against mine. Warm. Steady. As though she was testing the idea of leaving them there. I froze, my breath catching, the pen still dangling in my other hand. My skin was suddenly alive with the awareness of her touch, not just the contact itself, but the intention behind it. It wasn't an accident. I knew it, and so did she. I looked up at her. Her eyes lifted from the book and met mine, calm and unflinching. There was no apology in them, no sign that she was embarrassed. If anything, her gaze carried quiet strength, softened by something else I couldn't name. Vulnerability, perhaps. A question without words. The second stretched, each one louder in my chest than the last. The cafe noises blurred into nothing. All I felt was her skin against mine, the faint brush of her thumb shifting slightly, as though she were memorizing the shape of my hand. My heart thudded in my chest, but I didn't move. I didn't want to. I wanted to hold on to that fragile connection for as long as she would allow it. Her lips curved, not a smile, not exactly. More like an acknowledgement, as if she understood the weight of the moment as much as I did. And then she spoke, her voice barely above the hum of the cafe. Funny how some things don't need explaining. Her words sank into me, quiet but certain. I nodded, though my throat felt too tight to reply. Eventually, she eased her hand back, fingers sliding against mine in the softest trace before retreating to her cup. The absence of her touch felt almost louder than the touch itself, like a sudden cold after stepping out of the sun. But something had shifted. We both knew it. What had begun as an ordinary morning, what had seemed like nothing more than a chance encounter, had turned into something else entirely. All from the way her hand touched mine, and lingered, as though she wasn't quite ready to let go. After that touch, the air between us changed. It wasn't heavy, but it carried weight, the kind that makes every small movement feel deliberate, every glance feel like a question. I tried to distract myself with my notebook, but the words wouldn't come. She seemed to sense it, because after a quiet moment, she closed her book gently and looked at me. "You always write here?" she asked, her tone soft but steady. I smiled faintly. "Most mornings, when I can. Helps me think. Or at least, it's supposed to." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, amusement flickering in her eyes. "Does it work?" "Not today," I admitted, tapping the pen against the page. "Today feels different." The corner of her mouth curved, almost like she knew exactly what I meant but didn't want to name it. "I understand. Some days refuse to be ordinary." The way she said it made me curious. I leaned forward slightly, resting my arms on the table. "What about you? Do you come here often?" Her fingers circled the rim of her cup slowly before she answered. "Yes. This place, it feels like somewhere I can breathe. I've been coming for years." She paused, her eyes drifting to the rain-streaked window. "When the world feels too loud, this is where I go." I nodded, feeling the truth of her words. "Same for me. Funny how strangers can end up finding the same quiet corner." She glanced back at me, and there was something unguarded in her expression, like a veil had lifted just for a moment. "Not strangers anymore, though." Her words caught me off guard, not because they weren't true, but because of the gentle certainty with which she said them. My chest tightened, warmed, the way it does when someone speaks a thought you hadn't dared to voice yourself. I found myself wanting to keep her talking, to hear the shape of her life. So I asked, "What do you read?" Her face brightened, subtle but real. She tapped the cover of the novel still lying closed. "Mostly travel stories. Memoirs, sometimes. I like words that make me feel like I'm moving, even when I'm sitting still." "That sounds right," I said. "You seem grounded, but not in one place. Like you've seen a lot of the world." She tilted her head, studying me with quiet curiosity. "And you? What do you write about?" I hesitated, then admitted, "Mostly fragments. Thoughts I don't know how to say out loud. Sometimes I write about people I see here. Little sketches of them, I guess." Her eyes glowed with interest, the way someone's eyes do when they're leaning into a story. She propped her chin on her hand and asked, "And what about me? Did you write me down already?" The question sent a ripple through me. I laughed softly, nervous but sincere. "No. But maybe I should have." Her laugh in return surprised me. It wasn't loud, but it had a lightness to it, almost girlish, like a glimpse of someone younger living inside her still. It made something in my chest ache in the best way, not just attraction, but admiration. The conversation carried on like that, unhurried, weaving between small details of her life and mine. And though the words themselves were ordinary, the way she leaned in, the way her eyes held mine as I spoke, made everything feel like it mattered. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about what I should say, or how I might sound. I was simply present. With her. And the strangest part was how natural it felt, as though this wasn't a beginning at all, but a continuation of something that had been waiting for us both. By the time the conversation began to slow, the cafe had emptied almost entirely. The barista wiped down tables with a practiced rhythm, the bell over the door jingled only now and then, and outside the rain had finally broken into a faint mist. She stared down into her half-finished cup, swirling what was left of the coffee, her earlier openness now replaced with something quieter. The warmth of her laugh, the brightness in her eyes, it all dimmed just slightly, as though she'd pulled a curtain across a window. I noticed. I couldn't help but notice. "You okay?" I asked gently. Her eyes lifted to mine. For a moment, she looked like she might say yes, brush it off. But instead, she let out a soft sigh. "You remind me of someone I used to know." There was a weight in her voice, nostalgic, yes, but edged with something else. Regret, maybe. Longing. I leaned forward slightly. Someone important? She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around the handle of her cup. Someone who made me feel young. Alive. The way you do. She paused, biting her lip, as if she'd said too much. Then she shook her head with a small laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. But that was a lifetime ago. Her words landed heavy in my chest. I wanted to tell her she wasn't defined by the years, that the way I saw her had nothing to do with time and everything to do with the person sitting in front of me. But the truth pressed hard against me too. She was older, experienced, graceful in ways that felt beyond me. I don't think lifetimes are measured in years, I said quietly. Sometimes they're measured in moments. Her gaze softened, but her shoulders remained tense. She folded her arms gently, as though she were wrapping herself up, hiding. Do you ever think about what people would say about this? The way she said this, not naming it, not needing to, sent a pulse of recognition through me. She felt it too. The pull between us. The fragile, undeniable thread that had been tying itself tighter all afternoon. I do, I admitted. And I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. But I don't want to miss something real just because it doesn't fit other people's expectations. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. Instead, she lowered her gaze to the table. For a moment, it seemed like she might reach for my hand again, but she didn't. She folded her hands together in her lap instead, her thumb rubbing circles over her knuckle in a small, restless rhythm. The silence stretched between us, heavy but not empty. It carried weight, meaning. Her hesitation wasn't rejection, it was fear. Fear of being seen. Fear of wanting. I wanted to close the distance, to reassure her, but something in me held back too. Respect, maybe. Or the quiet knowledge that some decisions can't be rushed. So instead, I simply sat there with her, holding her gaze when she dared to lift it again, letting her see that I wasn't afraid of the hesitation, that I could wait as long as she needed. And in that fragile pause, I realized something. Sometimes love begins not with certainty, but with the courage to sit quietly in someone else's doubt. The evening had settled around us, drawing long shadows across the cafe floor. Most of the tables were empty now, chairs turned upside down, the soft scrape of the barista stacking dishes echoing faintly behind the counter. Time had slipped by without either of us noticing, and yet neither of us seemed ready to leave. I gathered my things slowly, sliding my notebook into my bag, though my movements felt reluctant. She sat across from me with her arms folded, her expression thoughtful, almost distant. I wondered if she was already pulling herself back into her private world, the one she carried so gracefully yet so guardedly. When I finally stood, adjusting my jacket, I felt the ache of parting before it even happened. I opened my mouth to say something, thank you, maybe, or good night, but before I could, she moved. Her hand reached across the table, sudden but gentle, her fingers brushing against mine before curling around them. This time, there was no hesitation, no fleeting accident. She held on, firmly, as though making a choice she hadn't allowed herself before. The shock of it stole my breath. Her palm pressed against mine, her skin warm, her grip steady. I looked down at our hands, hers smaller, graceful, yet undeniably strong, and then up at her. Her eyes met mine with a softness I hadn't seen before. There was no smile, no carefully measured expression. Just honesty, bare and unguarded. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The world outside the window blurred into the haze of street lamps and mist, but all I could feel was her thumb moving slowly, almost absent-mindedly, across my knuckles. A quiet, rhythmic gesture, filled with more meaning than words could ever hold. I wanted to ask her what she was thinking, what she wanted. But the truth was, I already knew. It was there in her touch, in the way she refused to let go, in the faint tremble of her breath as she held onto me like I was something she had almost talked herself out of reaching for. I started, my voice unsteady. She shook her head just slightly, her thumb brushing over my skin again, silencing me without a word. It wasn't dismissal. It was something else. A quiet plea to stay here, in this moment, without breaking it apart with explanations. So I stayed silent. Instead, I curled my fingers gently around hers, answering her grip with my own. Her shoulders eased, just barely, as if some weight she'd been carrying loosened for the first time. There was no declaration, no promise. Just the fragile, undeniable truth pressed into the space between our hands. And in that silence, in the simple act of her not letting go, I heard everything she couldn't bring herself to say. The cafe around us might as well have disappeared. What remained was her hand in mine, the quiet thrum of connection, and the unmistakable sense that something had shifted forever. When we finally stepped outside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of rain still clinging to the streets. The pavement glistened beneath the glow of the street lamps, each pool of light stretching across the ground like a quiet invitation. The world felt hushed, slowed down, as though the night itself was conspiring to hold on to this moment for us. She walked beside me, her coat pulled close, her hair catching faint traces of the mist. For a while, neither of us spoke. It wasn't the silence of strangers, though, it was something warmer, gentler. A silence that wrapped around us like a blanket, comforting in its simplicity. Then, with a small, almost hesitant motion, she slipped her arm through mine. The contact was unassuming, yet it sent a shiver through me. Her hand rested against my sleeve, light but certain, her body leaning just slightly toward mine. I could feel the warmth of her through the fabric, the rhythm of her steps falling in sync with mine. It was such a subtle thing, and yet it spoke louder than anything she could have said. I glanced at her. She wasn't looking at me, her gaze was fixed ahead, a faint smile curving her lips, as though she'd made peace with something inside herself. Her face, softened by the streetlight, looked at once strong and vulnerable. "You don't mind?" she asked finally, her voice quiet, almost cautious. I shook my head. "Not at all." Her smile deepened, and she let out a soft breath that sounded like relief. For a moment, I imagined she'd been carrying this hesitation for a long time, the fear of being seen reaching for someone younger, the worry of what it might mean. And yet here she was, walking arm in arm with me under the misty night, not hiding, not apologizing. We reached the corner where the street split, one way leading toward her neighborhood, the other toward mine. I slowed, not wanting the moment to end. She slowed too, her arms still looped through mine, as though she was reluctant to let go. "I suppose this is where I started, but the words caught in my throat." She turned toward me then, her face so close I could see the faint droplets of rain clinging to her lashes. She studied me quietly for a heartbeat, then lifted her free hand to brush a strand of damp hair away from my forehead. The touch was brief, tender, but it left me rooted in place. Her voice, low and steady, carried just enough warmth to undo me. "Let's not name it yet. Let's just walk." And so we did. Instead of parting ways, we chose the middle road, letting the night carry us forward side by side. The street stretched ahead, endless in its quiet promise, and though we didn't know where it would lead, I felt no urgency to define it. What mattered was her hand on my arm, the nearness of her presence, and the silent vow contained in the fact that she hadn't let go. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was searching for something. I felt like I'd found it, in the most unexpected of places, on an ordinary day, with a woman who turned an empty cafe seat into the beginning of everything. If this story touched you, don't forget to subscribe for more slow-burn romances like this one. And if you've ever felt that quiet, unexpected spark with someone, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it.